Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome back from the holidays and everything else. We're going to get started in now with going through and formulating what we heard at the public hearing, what we received through the website, and any miscellaneous comments that we've received to start trying to formulate a final set of recommendations now to the town board. Ginny, you weren't here the last time, but I think you had a chance to watch the last meeting.
Oh, yeah, I checked every day until it was up, and
You wanna
yes, I
share some of your
did watch
thoughts?
the meeting.
Want to share
And
some
I
of your
was
thoughts?
not impressed.
Okay.
I was unimpressed with us as board people. I will say, the first thing that I will say is when individuals were speaking, there was not a lot of, not emotion, but emoting. That is, it was very difficult to understand some of the words that were being said. I don't know if that's just a nature of how how we speak, but more clarity in our word and verbiage. And the second thing, there were a lot of side talks going on when there was an individual who had actually, in essence, taken the floor. I could hear a lot of side talks which distracted from what that particular individual was saying. And the third thing, it did not seem that there was a whole lot of board, I mean, I know how it works here, but it seemed like if anyone wanted to get a point, it was whoever could blurt into the microphone before somebody else blurted, rather than an orderly, perhaps raising of a hand and say, I would like to comment or something. Those are the three. I think it would behoove everyone to look at what we look like from, on the video. I was, like I said, I know how the meetings go, but I was not impressed with us.
So your comments relate to the last committee meeting?
That I was not at.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
And just to follow up on her comments, these microphones do pick up a lot of ambient noise. So if there's a sidebar conversation going on, chances are that's getting muffled in to what's being talked about by the larger group. So just keep that in mind as you go forward, especially because there's going to be a lot of things to talk about with different land use topics that we're going to go through with the list. Just keep that in mind as we go forward, because it is difficult for our PCTV crew to to focus in on that one person talking, because these mics are picking up a lot of noise. So just be aware of that. Okay?
Thanks, Gabe. All right. Why don't we jump in? Is there something you want to talk about regarding the public information meeting? Does anybody have any comment? I know we talked a little bit about it last month. We've probably beaten that to death. Public comments we received, and everybody has those. Mm-hmm. And going down to the committee members, I think it's time that we just actually start looking and evaluating the comments that we received from everybody. We go to the
list of many things.
the list. So this was a list that was prepared to identify the frequency of the number of people that identified types of uses that they would recommend to you as a group. I think we want to kind of go through, start the process of determining what you think is appropriate, what you don't think is appropriate, start to whittle down some of the major recommendations that we can start preparing for the town board, and hopefully we can come to a conclusion on this in a reasonable time frame, so you're not here all winter long and then into the spring. So, does anybody want to take the lead and talk about some of the things that you're interested in, that you felt weren't of value? Bob?
Just in general, there were some negative comments that I thought should be added, because that was
That's right.
Part of our charge, is that things that the community did not want to see. So there were some comments about no bus garage, no buildings, no athletic fields. I sent those to Zach.
You did.
Did you
I
get
saw
those?
those. No, you're right. And those were the ones that you did mention. And we're going to go through those too, because they are down towards the bottom. And I'm thinking, we'll talk about the ones that you don't want, but I think we're going to focus on the ones that you really do want to focus on as being the primary ones that you can send on to the town board. Mm-hmm. And then we'll have secondary ones that we can look at, things such as snowshoeing and, cross-country skiing. I think those are going to be givens just as part of the process of having winter programs on that site. but there are certain things in here that might be iffy, or you might not like them, or you might really like them. I think we want to kind of go through and find out what the consensus of the group is to determine what we should be sending on to the town board. So obviously, from day one, we've all talked about the fact that you're all supportive of walking, running, hiking, and rollerblade paths. I guess rollerblading is something that's an individual like or dislike, and that's something that you're just going to do if you have the ability to do it on the site. Certainly, there's asphalt paths along the property, and you can go out there and do them. The question's going to be, though, as we talk about hiking, when we talk about things like mountain biking, are we looking to develop separate paths for those two uses? Because you don't want to have a lot of conflict as people are walking, strolling through that park area, then all of a sudden somebody comes up behind them on a bike. We've had some accidents in Rochester over the last several years that have proven to be really fatal in some cases. So I guess we got to talk a little bit about that. If hiking is something that's going to be a separate use, biking is going to be a separate use. Eric, you're our biking expert. What do you think?
I think that there's probably room for both. I think that the way that biking is kind of moving is that there's a lot more interest among bikers in having bike-specific trails, not necessarily to keep other people off of them, but because some of the features and the things that they're looking for are not really interesting to hike at all. Certainly, just addressing having shared use trails, though. I mean, that's been going on at several parks in the area for quite a while with really no conflict if they're designed in a certain way so that there are good sight lines and things like that, and features to kind of keep speed down. There's a lot of ways you can mitigate those the trail conflicts out there, and it's.
Are you thinking that the trails, the hiking trails or the walking trails versus the biking trails, I think could actually either be parallel to or even remote of, depending on what you're looking for as a biker. It could be remote of the walking trails.
Yeah, and sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but when you say biking, I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah.
You're talking about
mountain
BMX,
biking.
kids jumping around doing tricks?
Well, there's a lot of
trail bikes, just cruising, or, my old...
Is the
And what about kids or family biking? So I think, to me, there's maybe three different aspects to biking.
is the land big enough? You guys do a lot of mountain biking, Beth, and your family. Is this what we're talking about? And you're a biker too, Eric. Is this property big enough for multiple, many people biking on it? As far as it's one thing to do it like, a family just doing a bike ride type of thing. But when I think of that back nine and all the hills and stuff like that, is it big enough for that type of use for biking?
It certainly is. If you look at a park like Dry Road Park out in Victor, that's 110 acres, of which there's probably trails on about 85, 90 acres of that, and there's like 5, 6, 7 miles of trails there, and there's quite a bit. And the trail density there is probably the highest of any park in the area. And I don't think in this case that's the kind of trail density that we'd be looking for at a park like this. But if you then look at something like Whiting Road, that's a really great trail system for beginner riders, and the trails are much wider. I would say kind of family-friendly riding, but I'm a little hesitant to say that because there's a lot of riding. There's a lot of kids who are more skilled riders in the area too that are looking for trails with more features on them. But the one thing that I would say that this property is particularly well suited for, especially since there's so much area that is already cleared, is the idea of a more of like a bike park type area. So having an area that's several acres that is dedicated just to biking, like features, things like rollers, like a pump track. I don't know if everybody's familiar with what that is, but a pump track is a usually like an oval shaped track with rollers in it, and the idea is that you can pump your bike. You actually don't pedal around it, and you use just your own pushing power on the rollers in order to propel yourself around the track. And so it's a fun different challenges. It's something that you would find typically in, like in a skate park or a BMX park, but it's dirt instead of concrete. And then other things like what we would call like a jump line or like a dual slalom course where you would have more of an elevation change where people can do a similar kind of thing. We're using berms and jumps and things like that to make it interesting. And those kind of features will use less area than a really densely populated trail system, but will be a great kind of destination for people to come and do that kind of stuff. And it's frankly, it's a deficiency that the Rochester area has, that we don't have much like this other than out at Dry Road Park in Victor. And we have some new stuff that is out there in the last year, and it's just amazing. I've met several people on different occasions that had driven more than an hour to come to the stuff that was available at Dry Road Park. So we actually have an opportunity here to make something even bigger and better than that. Jim?
At the Dryer Road Park, do people pay for this?
No, it's there's a mountain biking organization in town called Genesee Regional Off-Road Cyclists. We got, so I'm on the board of GROC. We got a grant from REI to build a lot of this stuff, and then we also solicited private donations as well, and raised the rest of the money to do that. The rest of it is volunteer labor to make a lot of it happen, but we actually contracted with a professional designer and builder, and the results have shown to be just phenomenally better than what we had tried to kind of hack together in the past.
I had a question. What does it look like from like the parking lot or wherever? I mean, I'm just picturing this very dirty, messy, like area. Is that, so I wanted to ask, like, is it aesthetic, you know,
Depends on what your aesthetics are. Like I look at it and I say, oh, this looks awesome.
Grass in it?
How would I?
Right now there isn't, but that's one of the things. Like this was just built, so right now it's dirt and it's dirt mounds and stuff like that. But eventually, yeah, you need to add vegetation to it in order to help retain like the berms and things like that.
Well, so let me add just a little context,
Yeah,
because
go
I'm
ahead.
not on the GROC board and relatively newer than he is to mountain biking. But I think if you think about kind of the back nine is probably a place where you're thinking of, right? It's not necessarily going to be like front and center, but yeah, the pump track, it's a dirt track,
yeah.
you know? But the rest of the trails at Dryer are in the woods. You know,
Okay.
they're tucked in, and I think that there's perimeter on the outside of this property that can handle that. And then, but I wanted to add, not just from an aesthetic standpoint, but people who might travel an hour to get here are gonna then look at restaurants or bars in Penfield. If I go over to Tryon, we're about 50% likely to go down to McGregor's and have a burger afterwards, or a beer, or K2 Brewing, and there's an economic impact that you could have, you know, just by the things that are already in the area might be positively impacted by people who are traveling.
I guess I'm not against it at all. My concern is the people that really love the beauty and the aesthetics of, especially the back nine. And so if we had something like that, I would want to make sure that the view is preserved to be a beautiful view. And so if that would have to be like I would think like on the periphery somewhere that's not maybe where most people would like look and go, oh, isn't this a beautiful, and see mounds of dirt, like you know.
Yeah, and I think there's, you know, just doing a rough look around the site, I think there's a few different places that on the site that something like that could exist.
Can I ask you, if you happen to have a picture of the Dryer Park?
Can you bring up just Google Maps and go to Dryer Road and do a satellite view?
That-
or something more sophisticated, whatever you have. So,
This is a town park?
it's in Vic,
Yes.
yeah, Town Park in Victor.
Victortown Park, do they provide liability insurance for that, or?
Yes.
Or do you guys cover that?
No, the town park.
The town covers that?
We cover the liability like while we're building something
Yeah.
for the workers
No,
and
but
things like that.
For the
but
general use of it?
yeah. So actually, if you
So-
zoom in over the parking lot there,
Yeah, so the big brown thing you see, there's actually a quarry, not,
Oh.
just so you know, that,
Well, we've got
that's
one
like
of those
next door to
also.
what we've got.
Okay, that's the.
But so,
Ours is bigger.
you've got, there's an ice rink there, and then that's the main parking
The
lot.
ice rink is where?
Well, it's
It's
In the
below
parking,
and to
in
the
the
left.
parking lot, or what is
So-
it?
so
Oh,
that-
right
there you go.
Okay,
And
because
then
that's something that's been suggested.
the part that's down at the kind of, you see the little access road that curves in there, those are all soccer fields between the parking lot and the access road, and then more fields below that. And the woods around it are all, I mean, you can kind of see some of them, mountain bike trails in there. The pump track, if you pull down, other way, sorry, back towards the parking lot. So the aesthetics is what you're asking about. This is the older part. I mean, right,
It
but
looks
it's,
relatively small from what I
yeah,
was
that's
Yeah.
the old.
imagining. Oh, I see, it's two
That's,
parts.
well, that's the newer pictures, the
Yeah,
other
so
image.
the area to the left is the new pump track area. The area to the right is what we call a skills area, so there's like wooden features, like skinnier sections of like elevated, I guess it's almost like a skinny elevated boardwalk, practice just balance skills, things like that, and there's some other just features in there to practice different skills. So typically those kinds of things are included in a bike park.
You call this mountain biking?
Oh yeah.
Is that what that's called?
Yes.
Okay, and what are the trails through the woods called?
That's also
Mountain
mountain
biking.
biking. Yeah, this is just a different aspect of it.
What is that snake-like thing?
So
Ramps?
that is no, it's actually, those are berms, and so you would ride your bike. There's,
Go up
what
and
you're
over.
not seeing is there's an elevation loss from the right to the left,
Okay.
and you ride down that, and the idea is just that you're practicing turning on big berms, things like that, and then actually one of the visions that we have here is to make what's called a dual slalom course, where you would have two of those that parallel each other, and then people can just impromptu race down them if they want to, or just ride them, whatever. I mean, it's just different kind of stuff, especially for people who are intimidated by going out on trails and going and riding for an hour or several miles. Coming and doing something like this is a lot more inviting, because you can go take a 30-second run around the pump track, and it's amazing how tiring that is to do that. And then you stop, chat with your friends for a little bit, go and do it again.
How many
Yes.
people would use this, like on a given weekend, do you think?
Well, Dry Row Park on a given weekend probably sees, I don't know, 100 to 200 people on
Wow.
a nice Saturday. Probably even more if it was like a really good summer day.
Mostly kids, any grown-ups?
Oh yeah, it's actually more grown-ups.
Am I a grown-up?
Yeah.
Are you at McGregor? How about at McGregor's?
One of the-
Afterwards, no.
One of the problems that we have with mountain biking in Rochester is that until recently, most of the trails in Rochester were really only accessible to adults because they were difficult. There was very technical features on them and stuff like that. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is make more trails that are inviting to children, to beginner riders and stuff, because the sport won't continue if it's just going to be, people who are really skilled and know what they're doing and, can take their crashes at the beginning and fight their way through it. That's not the experience that
So those
we want for
trails,
people,
are they mulched or anything, or it's just dirt?
No, it's dirt.
Dirt.
Dirk, how does the town keep motorized dirt bikes off the tracks?
there's just enough usage that those people would get kind of shunned out of there in no time. Like you can't go there with a motorized vehicle and not encounter a lot of cyclists. And similarly, this park before these trails were developed, before this trail system was here, was like, this was where the kids hung out and drank and stuff like that. And since then, like, that kind of activity just doesn't exist at this park anymore.
Would you perceive this type of use like on the front nine versus the back nine that has a lot of topography that might be difficult for people to get up and down?
It depends on where you put it. I mean, there's certainly, again, if you were going to keep this if you were going to do something like this in a more concentrated area, I could see using, say, one of the holes, one of the former golf course holes, as an area to do this, and you would want some elevation change for some of this, like a pump track you want on a flat area, but a skills area, and maybe some kind of downhill flow trails like the one that kind of snakes through there, that you would certainly want some elevation change for. But I mean, just looking at the terrain on the back nine, you could certainly develop also just some casual kind of cross-country riding trails there on that terrain as well.
Question,
Yeah.
is this used all year in the winter also? Or no?
Some of these things are not. So like the pump track is particularly vulnerable in the winter.
Okay, yeah, I would expect.
Yeah, because when it gets muddy and stuff
But
like
the
that.
trails,
You don't
yes?
want, the trails will get used. We've worked really hard over the last decade and a half to develop a culture of when the trails are wet, you don't ride.
Okay.
That way people aren't rutting them up and stuff like that. And we do a ton of work to make these trails happen. And so it's frustrating to see people out there riding in the mud. And we haven't stopped it altogether, but compared to where we were 15, 20 years ago, it's a huge difference. You go out there on a rainy day and there's like one car in the
Okay,
parking
and the
lot.
second question, when you say a couple hundred on a weekend, is that a concentrated 200 at the same time?
No, throughout
Or
the
is it varying through the day?
Yeah, throughout the day. You
Okay,
would
so
probably-
the parking, I can see here they have pretty good parking.
Yeah, that parking lot is really only full when you have
Sporting events.
Competition
road
or
cycling
something.
going on, people are meeting there for that, the ball fields are being used, and you have people out riding. I would say at any one time, there's probably a max of like 50 people using the trail system at one time.
There seem to be a lot of cars there. Where are all the people?
They're in the trails.
A lot of people are
there.
on the
Out in the
trails.
woods?
Yeah.
And the trails in the woods?
This is actually, while
There's a party.
this stuff was, so
They're all at the party.
this dirt here on the right
Yeah.
is actually the new jump line, which is also really awesome because it has progression for beginners, so you're not just taking people into like really expert level BMX jumps or anything like that. I mean,
Eric,
yeah.
how big of a space is that we're looking at?
The whole green space right there is probably, is that like 10 acres at the
Six or
most?
seven.
I was gonna say
I
maybe
don't-
7. but-
Yeah,
6 or 7 maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, Eric, are there competitions from time to time?
There are some on the trails, but there are no competitions on like the pump track or anything like that. There are competition styles that you can have, like
Cool.
like people will race on pump tracks. This particular pump track is not really set up for racing,
So how many
I
acres
don't
is
know how to
it?
do that.
but that does happen, just not necessarily here.
I can draw lines and get distances.
This area out here is more about practicing skills and learning to do some of these features, and for people who also are more interested in, say, jumping their bike than riding it for 10 miles. So it's a different aspect of riding your bike.
Do the club does all the maintenance, or is it shared with the town? How does that work?
The GROC does all the maintenance
All the
on this. Yeah. So we
So
have
is GROC interested in putting this here?
very, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so they would like be interested in maintaining it?
Yes.
Another one?
Yeah.
So it'd be 2, okay.
Yeah. And actually, we maintain several parks in the area, so Bay Park West, Tryon, Dry Road Park. We also help out at Whiting Road.
How far, where are all these parks? I've never heard of them.
So Ontario, or excuse me,
How many do we have in Monroe County, let's say? Or, you know, if you drew a 40-minute radius of Penfield,
if you
how many are there?
if you fudge that 40-minute radius down to Ontario County Park, which is or Gannett Hill Park in Ontario County, if you include that, so it's Dryer or CP, Park West, Tryon. I don't want to say there's a fifth.
Well,
To go
Beach
over
County,
some.
Whiting is not a public, or not Monroe County, but.
Yeah, Whiting is in Monroe County, but yeah, there's still
So you have at least 6,
yeah.
5, 6, 7.
So we have a structure of park managers. So we have a park manager for each of the parks that,
Do you guys maintain them all at this point?
yeah.
Oh, but do they all have pump tracks or?
No.
Okay.
Just,
They're mostly trail systems.
Trails, okay.
So I would say the differentiation is more kind of like bike park kind of riding, which is what we were just looking at, versus cross-country trail riding. But there's a lot more crossover because people like me, like I've been riding cross-country for almost 20 years. And I want to learn some of these other skills, especially because they're transferable to the trail when you're riding over certain features and things like that. Having been able to practice that in a concentrated setting makes me a better rider on the trail. And other people who are just getting into the sport, going out to a pump track and riding around for half an hour is a lot more accessible than going out to trails. But if they do that enough, you know, and they see, hey, there's this great trail system right here, well, maybe I'll go ride the pump track for 20 minutes and then ride the trail for a little while.
But you said that the pump track could be in the front 9, right?
It could really be anywhere that you have like a 1 to 2 acre flat area.
Like a driving range?
That area would be pretty good for it, yeah.
But the trails would be in the back 9.
The trails could be throughout the park, yeah.
Okay.
And you could certainly make trails that are not shared between hikers and bikers, and they could just be crisscrossing them, especially with the grasses around there, and even what little vegetation there is compared to, say, a wooded area at any of these other parks. You wouldn't even know that trail was there because it's a ribbon of dirt about 12 to 18 inches wide, so unless there's somebody on it, you wouldn't even know that it was there unless you were like right next to it. So
that's like a mountain biking trail
yeah, that would be more
versus
like
a recreational trail.
yeah.
What does a hiking trail look like as opposed to a mountain biking trail? Because you're going through the woods, how do you know which is which?
They're actually very similar. In fact, there's a lot of crossover between traditionally.
But you try to keep them separate, right?
No,
Or
not
no?
necessarily.
Not
At all these
necessarily?
parks that we've been talking about here in town, the trails are all shared.
The bikers and the hikers get along?
Yeah.
I actually, sorry to butt in.
Yeah.
No.
I use Dryer Park. I went there every Saturday training for a trail marathon. And it was like totally accessible, and the amount of community involvement that was there. We were there in the early
Were you
spring.
running?
Sorry for the bikers.
You were running or on a bike?
Yep, running right on the trails,
Okay.
and the amount of trails
So
that
you
you can
can
see.
have a dual use
Yep,
trail.
and everyone
through
was
the
really
woods.
polite, but the amount of community involvement, we saw teams there.
Are they mulched? What's the ground like?
No, it's just
bare
hard
ground, just
dirt.
natural
Back
ground,
dirt.
just natural
But
ground.
enough for us to run on the trail, and you'd get out of the way, and everyone was really
Okay.
polite. But
But then
we saw.
if we want like family biking with toddlers and stuff, that should be in a different place.
well,
We saw
Or not.
we saw kids and a bunch of parents with their kids, but
You wouldn't have to pave it or anything like that. You
Yeah.
just,
I have visions of the
kids going through.
the path that already exists.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't
being
picture
connected.
this when people said biking. I just said, no, this
so-
kind of is like a real shock to me, to be honest, and I'm not saying good or bad. Coming around and where the driving range is now, if I saw that,
What did you envision? Just is
more like the mountainous trails in the back is where people bike and stuff like that. I don't, really don't change the setting as much as use the setting for your activities. So you have kind of the you know, hills, we call them mountains, whatever you want to call them, trees, you know, people can go through there, you know, make trails through there. Putting something like this, I just didn't, I never even knew these existed, and I'm not a biker, so I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I just can't imagine, like, where the driving range is now. I have people, they know I'm on the board, saying, why'd you guys cut down the
Why
trees?
did
What's
Yeah,
going on?
yeah, yeah,
Why did you guys
exactly.
cut down the trees? And then doing something like this, where this is what you see for
Right.
this beautiful park area,
Right. Yeah.
it's an interesting, it's interesting to say the least.
I mean,
Yeah.
I could see it like on the front nine, like behind, maybe on the first hole, because that's like not on the road and it's kind of hidden behind some stuff. But I wouldn't put it.
Even there, to me, again, something like this, because you still see the front, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if there's gonna be a restaurant or whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's
There
true.
could be a
Yeah.
restaurant there, that type of thing.
Well,
Like, I just, to me, it's an eyesore, but
Mm-hmm.
that's me, I'm not a biker, so I can't, that's just my opinion.
I want to second that,
I mean, you know, again, I don't wanna poo-poo anybody, so
nor
this is
do I
just,
want to poo-poo it. but-
I thought we'd use the land we have and use the trails we have to do something with, and not put necessarily a designated thing like this, where this is a one-use thing at this point.
I want to point out though, and I understand what you're saying, that this is a pretty limited space that would be
Right.
needed,
Mhm.
you know, and that there's a possibility that this can be, you know, what's
Yeah,
the
maybe-
hole, what's the hole that parallels Wayland? The one that's currently has a buffer of trees around
Trees.
it.
12.
The one that goes towards the retirement home, well,
12.
like just as an example.
Right.
That is not something that you come around the corner and you've got, I understand what people are saying about the,
But you still gotta get there, you know, I mean,
so you're right.
Yeah,
you're
if they
right.
leave the trees up.
Yeah, right.
Put
Yeah.
it behind the trees.
So, just as an example, and I understand your hesitation, Jeff. You're worried about locking in space that can only be used for
It's-
one.
right.
That space there,
There's a couple other, you know,
Yeah.
you can go beyond 12 also.
yeah,
You
that's
still
twice
get
as big as the
terrain
space
over
at
there.
Dryer, right there.
Right.
Well,
But I
the
also-
the open space area, not including the woods and all the,
Yeah, no, the space, that green space, so.
I also think people want paved trails to ride bikes and, you know, with their families.
No, and I think that's much more friendly on the whole for young families. And I would envision that there's space for that as well.
If we could, as we talk about some of this, we talk about hiking and families, we're also talking here of handicap trails, which is a, you know, different kind of population, and along with people with baby carriages, that type of thing. I think separate's going to be a very important factor for
Terry, do you see that on the front nine? I would like to see that too. Do you see that on the front nine or in the more hilly section on the
Oh,
back nine?
I thought, my envision, a little similar to Jeff, was that the back nine had some real good terrain that could maybe be some nice mountain biking being done there.
But for wheelchairs,
Yeah, for front nine, I think is a lot more
we have a-
level and a lot
we have a
family
network
oriented.
of cart paths that could be, you know, extended and looped and,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, so have you
Right.
could come back to the
You
starting
need a
point.
certain amount of space when you have a handicapped trail. So, yeah, I think that, you know, I'd be more inclined to put some of those in the front
Front
nine,
nine,
you know.
That's what I was
That
thinking.
would be more selective.
But I think it should be double wise, that people you'd have walkers and runners on one side and then like bikers or, you know, walkers, runners, handicapped on one side and then families biking or rollerblading on another side that could go faster. You know what I mean? Like, I think it needs to be wider than the cart path today.
Wider than the cart path.
But there's a good base of car path that you
Yeah,
can extend. and-
absolutely.
This group, I can't remember what you called the group that you're in,
Genesee, so we call it GROC for short, but
Do they
Genesee Regional
maintain-
Off-Road Cyclists.
liability insurance for these parks? Do they?
No,
I
they-
know, I'm at the Webster Ice Rink and I'm also a board member there, and we have like Webster Youth Hockey plays there, and we insist they have their own liability insurance.
Yeah. So we have our.
We have insurance too, of course, but any group that comes in there has to have their own liability insurance.
We have insurance for building and maintaining trails, so we're out there with, all the maintenance is done with hand tools, there's no power tools or anything like that, it's all just shovels, rakes, clippers, things like that. We have insurance for when people work on the trails, but for the general public using the trails, it's the, in the case of Dry Road Park, it's Victor Parks that covers that. Tryon and Bay Park West are both Monroe County parks, and those are covered under the same insurance that covers people who are there walking their dog and hiking and trail running and things like that. So it's not necessarily anything that's particularly more liable than other activities. So
I don't know about that.
I know it's something that people who are less familiar with it. It does seem like it's a riskier sport, but we have people playing soccer and things like that on ball fields all the time that are getting injured as well. And frankly, there's really not a lot of serious injuries with biking.
And I said, getting back to the items that we have to discuss, we've spent an awful lot of time talking about one specific thing. The number one item that people voted for on this was walking, running, hiking. Second was undeveloped open space. And I like what Jeff was saying, and these guys are talking about the back nine as perhaps mountain biking. But open space does not necessarily mean all that stuff.
So,
Undeveloped. Undeveloped is the word that was used, so.
Well, I think undeveloped in their minds was not building
No
anything.
buildings.
Not building houses.
I don't know that it was.
Well, open space intimates that it's not going to be developed.
Yes.
Whether you determine whether biking trails or hiking trails are
Hiking
developing.
trails.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, that's your opinion. Somebody else's opinion is that it's not. So I think when the public's saying that they don't want it developed, they don't want housing on it, they don't want some type of construction activity on it, whether it's
No bus garage.
whatever the case may be. But the point is, I think that you're going to have to, in your process, and we're really spending a lot of time on this, probably more than we probably should at this point in time, but you're going to have to make a determination. First of all, you got to understand, nothing is going to stay the same as it has been.
Yes.
It's going to be different. Whatever it is, it's going to be different. That's the way progression works throughout all of our lives. It's going to be something different than it is. So you have to kind of balance out, and again, what you're doing is you're making recommendations to the town board. Ultimately, the town board is going to have to make a determination what it feels is best for the community in terms of whether they should have hiking trails, biking trails, zip lines, whatever the case may be. But you're trying to determine whether or not hiking and biking are appropriate uses at this point in time based on what you saw the public tell you that they wanted. Is it an appropriate recommendation to make to the town board? How it's laid out, at some point in time, the town board's going to have to hire a consultant that specializes in all these types of uses, whatever they may end up being. They're going to have to figure out how to lay it out. Even things like if you were to determine that there should be a park shelter on the property, that park shelter has to be placed somewhere where it's going to be in close proximity to parking areas, because you can't cart stuff to that shelter 4 miles to get to it, or up and down hills to get to it, without some type of accessibility that's handicapped accessible, as you know, and then, it makes it simple for people to get in and out. So if you recommend hiking and biking, at some point in time, somebody's going to have to develop how a plan could work that would try to minimize impacts to the property.
There's two things. My view of what was said in the comments about open space was leave it the way it is. Just leave it go, and maybe just some mowing to keep the trees down, rough mowing. There were a lot of comments along those lines, and I read through them, and I got similar numbers to it. But to me, undeveloped means don't touch it,
so
basically.
do you think that
And that trails and skate pad, rollerblade paths was a different category. That was one thing. The second thing, I'm just wondering, where are we now? When is the back nine to be opened, and Are there more trees to be cut down?
There are a few more trees to be cut down. I talked to Tony McFarland.
Are they going to take those stumps out?
There are, when I say a few, I mean a few. There's just a few left. I think they were looking at one on the north side over by the Clark House is going to come down. And there are a few left on the south
Another one by
side.
the Clark House? Oh, geez.
There's one that could fall into the Clark House.
Doesn't look like the Clark House anymore.
Well, it will again. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the nice thing about trees. You can replant them and
Yeah.
make it nicer.
Gotta be safe, that's for sure.
Just before we move on,
Yeah, just a question, Jim.
Yep.
It seems like this, what we have here is a facility right in the middle of the town. It's going to be very much used by people, and there's strong sentiment, as you can hear, to keep it very undeveloped. But I'm just wondering whether the kind of facility that Eric is envisioning may be better suited out at East Penfield, and there's that big park out there near the fire station.
Sherwood Fields? Is
Yeah.
that what you're referring to?
The park out there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would that be a possibility in your opinion?
Well, there are actually trails on Sherwood Fields right now, and I think that they do allow both, and I don't know if we had any conflicts out there. I know there was concerns for that early on. Andy, I don't know if that's the case or not, but I know that you can bike and you can hike out there as well.
Yeah, it seems like it would be less disruptive, this kind of thing that Eric's talking about. You know what I'm talking about?
Out at Sherwood?
Way out these
Yes, it's Sherwood. It's Sherwood.
Yeah, down where the fire station is, and yeah. It's a beautiful facility and beautiful piece of land anyway, and it's not used very much. And it might be easier, and you might have less resistance out there.
Yeah, actually, this is kind of history now, but Grok did try to develop trails out there at one point, and I think that kind of fell apart. It's also very wet out there. It'd be
There are wetlands on the
develop,
site, yes.
yeah,
that's
to
right.
develop trails. So I just want to point out too that like people were asking questions. I mean, obviously, I have my vision of what should be here, and I was hoping to just kind of answer people's questions and just educate. If people have other questions about this, certainly feel free to ask, but we can do that offline for sure.
I had a couple of things I
You
wanted
did
to
have a
finish.
question.
Since the back nine is going to begin to be used, the wooded areas, starting on the 13th hole and going down where you cross the creek and all that, you pretty soon get into a lot of private properties. There's property lines. I think I counted, there's something like 90 property lines bordering on the town property. And when you get down in the woods, you don't know, like from Huntington Meadow, those lots from Huntington Meadow are long and skinny, and you can see them on this handout. They go all the way down there, so I do think the town in some way has to delineate the town's property line, because you're gonna run afoul of residents.
We will most probably do that as time goes on. Generally speaking, when we have new development, we identify areas that the town owns versus where the new
Yeah.
residents own. And we do have placards, there's small placards that we put at intervals along.
Yeah, there's gonna have to be a
property lines to show people where they are.
rough
I would suspect as
indication
time
of
goes
where-
on and we finally do figure out what we really want to do here,
yeah.
whether it's something or nothing.
Well, when people start hiking and
They
cross-country
should know
skiing, they're
they're not
gonna
supposed to be
easily,
on private property.
get
Correct.
off town property.
Good point.
The other thing is, since it is town property and hunting's not allowed, it needs to be posted, because this area does allow hunting with bow. It's DEC region or WMU, Wildlife Management Unit 8C, and hunting is allowed with the owner's permission.
That's right, and first of all, and you saw.
I've seen
Mr.
hunters
McCollum's,
go in on one of my neighbors, through my neighbor's backyard. And I'm sure he was on town property, because you gotta be 150 feet from a house, from any buildings.
Right.
But that area is open for bow hunting with
Well, you
owner's
cannot hunt
permission.
on town property.
But it needs to be posted.
It most probably will
Yeah,
have to be.
it'll have to be,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Especially get down in those areas that are remote from the road.
Because you don't want hikers and bow hunters mixing it up.
Well, a good hunter would know the law, to know that you can't hunt on town
Bikers are
property.
bow hunters.
Yeah.
All right.
No,
So-
no, Tony said on the TV interview that it's not, hunting's not allowed on the west end of town, but it is for bows.
Well, it is, but the other part of that is it's not allowed on any town property.
Yes, on town
So we've got, but you're right,
Exactly.
it should be posted, because that's the only way a potential
have to
hunter
be,
knows that he can or cannot hunt on that site. Any hunter should really be getting property owner's permission to do
Well, guys
anything.
have come and knocked on my door, wanted to hunt in my backyard, and I said,
Yeah.
no, I've got a dog, I don't want you back.
Well, at least they had the courtesy to do that sometimes.
Yeah, no,
they may or may not.
I thank them for doing that, because usually they don't.
All right, so I don't want to belabor this, but why don't we, is everybody in favor of making a recommendation that trails for hiking be developed on the site?
Yes.
Is there anybody that isn't? Everybody's good? All right.
Good.
And they can be they can be joint use for,
Well, that's my next question. We're going to do this in steps,
okay.
okay?
I think Beth has a
You had a question, what is it?
Yeah, well, so Jenny, you were representing the viewpoint that it remained undeveloped. What's
No.
your view?
no,
This point.
that's what that category
Yeah.
means.
Right,
Yeah.
so you were representing the public's viewpoint,
Yeah.
right?
But
Do you think that that includes hiking trails?
No,
Okay.
I'm sorry? You do not think it's
No.
appropriate to have hiking trails on the property?
no, I think that's,
No, she thinks it is.
Undeveloped doesn't
it's
include
part of,
that.
no, it does not include that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
No,
a
that was-
separate category.
Yeah, there were, and I agree with that, because I read through them all, and the people that said that, they wanted it the way it is now, the way it was. The way it
They
was.
just don't
Well, it's going to be more
buildings.
wild than the way it was.
They don't want
No, more than-
buildings.
They don't want buildings, but they don't want
Anything.
cart paths and stuff like that. They want to walk in the fields with
Oh,
their
I need,
dogs.
I thought
private
hiking
backyard,
and cart paths were okay.
Well, again, remember,
Well, yes,
this is,
those people that said that, but
this
undeveloped,
is town property.
but
and we have to
undeveloped,
provide
nothing.
accessibility
Leave
to
it
all.
as is.
And somebody in a wheelchair
Natural.
cannot walk the fields. And you gotta keep these things in perspective. It's not just us here in this room as a group. It's 36,000 people in town, and people who might wanna come here from other locations to use it as well. So walking has to be addressed to address everybody's needs.
I'd like to read a comment from Mindy McLaren. She wants to keep it as undeveloped as possible and include walking, biking, trails, etc., places for photographers, low impact, open space, a comprehensive plan to include the lake, blah. But Mindy McLaren said undeveloped and then said walking and hiking trails. So there's some confusion about what that means.
No, it's interpretation.
Yeah.
I can read, I'll find
Just-
some other comments
Yeah,
too.
right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the comments I've read, both online and in our sessions, did reflect that sentiment, that the undeveloped didn't include, that it meant, it was fine to have hiking trails and running trails. They want people to use the property.
Yeah.
If I may add, I think, we don't have pinpoint locations of where a lot of these comments came from. This is an assumption I'm making, I'll be honest. The people that want it undeveloped and untouched, I'm assuming are going to be the residents within a immediate scope of the park that want to open their door, walk out their backyard, and see untouched, majestic lands. This is property that 36,000 people are going to want to drive from the east side and use.
And use it.
To drive from Webster down and use, to drive from Parrington up and use. I mean, we can keep space looking nice, but I think we have to recognize that we have to put something here.
I second it.
We took it off
Well-
the tax rolls.
You need to do all of those things, is what, I think is what the reality is. You need some wild spaces for people who want to let their dog, well, I guess they can't, it's town property, they can't let them run off leash,
Like
but
We'll get to that, that's an interesting point.
That's actually on there.
But I think,
but you know what I mean, but there's got to be some spaces that
Yeah, hold on.
are pristine.
I think it's important that we recognize that we took 250 acres off of the tax rolls. If we did consider a portion of it to have some revenue coming back in, I know that there are a lot of people that are against the bus garage. That one, sorry you're right in the way, but that one little speck right before you even come down the southeast corner that you highlighted, that was 9 acres, 9.7. I mean, that could be a revenue generator for the rest of the 240 acres that doesn't touch it, it's solid. Just a thought. I mean, I think it would be beneficial for the town to also think of how we can take put a dent into the financial burden that the whole town is taking on.
I agree. I think we should call in the fellow that wanted to have put the driving range in. I think that's an excellent use of that space and would generate some revenue.
He does want to come to speak with you as well.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Is that part of our charter, is to generate funds for the town? I mean, is that
No.
Is your group? No.
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 Are you talking about the guy with the soapbox derby cart?
No,
Or the driving range like for golf?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's looking at this site here, I think.
He wants the 11.
Oh, he wants to go over here?
He wants the driving range and that.
Oh, Paul Sanders or
It's got a
Mark
plan.
Regan were the names. That
So, and you do have to look at how much of this area is being allotted for each use, because obviously you're committing, if you say yes, you make a recommendation, you're committing X number of acres for each potential use.
Did you have some other ideas of revenue generation besides that, the driving range in that area?
Not yet.
No, but
That I wish to
something.
share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the
Let some
Clark
other
House
things
should
bubble up
generate
first.
revenue, right?
Hopefully the Jack Clark House does. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to ask the next question. In relationship to trails, are people supportive of the possibility of having bike trails on the site?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, very good. All right, rollerblading, that kind of thing, that's just kind of a weekend thing you go out and do. I mean, if somebody comes to us and says, we'd like to have a rollerblading area, that's something we'd have to look at as an option. I don't know.
That's in a skate park.
It's a skate park, and I'm not sure anybody's here for a skate park yet, although I might be wrong.
Well, rollerblading
photos.
would require smooth paved paths
Right.
versus hiking and biking don't
They
necessarily
would have to
require
basically
that.
use the paths that you were walking on during our tours. They couldn't
cart
do it
paths.
any other way.
Well, yeah. Maybe we should agree on a definition of, and what was the term we were using about keeping the place essentially undeveloped? But the critical word is essentially, because I think most of us anyway want to have, in a way that people have access to it, at least for hiking, probably, maybe, for biking. So maybe we can agree on that. And then the question becomes, what kind of a surface will we have? There's a difference, it seems to me, between, you have to develop it to some degree, so it won't be too muddy and relatively accessible. So gravel might be less of an intrusion on the land than, say, asphalt. So I think we should talk about that kind of thing and then decide where to put it.
The ADA is gonna have something to say about what we put down for people with wheelchairs. and-
Well, yeah, but well, perhaps though, we start putting paving and asphalt all over the place.
Yeah, they can be both, you know,
It's more
some that are and
intrusive,
some that aren't.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
is,
Yeah.
you know, a handicap loop trail would be nice,
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily have to be the only trail.
No, and handicap almost by definition wouldn't have to be very big.
What is the ADA?
Yeah.
Jim, is that,
Yes,
is
there's
ADA
requirements.
something?
Well, there are requirements for
Yeah, there's requirements.
accessibility, 1 on 12 slopes wherever you're creating grade change. So you've got to make sure that it's usable.
Would they have anything to say about how big, what was handicap accessible was?
Yeah.
or-
Well, you're not sending them down that one.
Right. I'm talking about like, if there was a small loop to handicap, but there was a huge thing for people to walk. Then the ADA have a problem.
Nice way to put it.
No, that's right. And then the other part of it is you could possibly accommodate that larger area to make it handicap accessible depending on the situation.
If we get into any discussions about structures, so if you're talking about adding a new shelter or lodge or something, all that would have to be ADA compliant. So you'd have to provide people to have access to those. So if you said, yes, let's put some, whether they're open air shelters or a lodge or wherever the discussion goes, those need to be ADA requirements. I don't think there's anything ADA about how big a loop path would be or a traveling area, but they need to accommodate, ADA bathrooms if bathrooms is a consideration for the property.
But then,
There are just some areas that you can't make ADA accessible. It's just,
when you and I discussed the sidewalk that's in front of my house, we talked about how wide that needed to be,
Yep.
and it needed to be wide enough for 2 wheelchairs to pass each other.
Yep, and there
So
is.
there is a requirement.
You're on Panorama Trail, and Panorama Trail exceeds the one on 12 in certain locations. There is allotments in ADA law that you can match the surrounding grade. Obviously, you can't lower a hill to make sure that it's only 8.3%. It can follow that grade, but it can't be any steeper than the adjoining grade, and normally it needs to be 5% running slope or less, on average. But if you do the steep slope Panorama Trail, it's steeper than a 5% grade, so technically it doesn't meet that part of ADA compliance, but as long as it matches the grade of the road adjoining to it, logic says you can't make it any flatter than what the road exists, so.
Have a ramp.
You
Actually,
can't have a switchback ramp going all the way down there.
the sidewalk issue, when you said sidewalks, it's not on here at all, but we have so many communities around this space that don't have sidewalk access. Most people,
most of them don't.
most of them don't. So can we put as part of this recommendation to put in sidewalks so the adjacent communities can walk to the facility?
Sure. I'll let Mark talk a little bit about sidewalk and the cost of sidewalks.
I think that's definitely a recommendation to the town board. I think as you're talking about having pathways, walkways, throughout, having a recommendation to the town board to, get more accessibility to it. Typically, you need to have a use to draw the people in for us to create sidewalks to it. So at this point, being a golf course, most people drive there. See more people walking with a golf bag or something else, so there really wasn't the demand to access that. We have a lot of sidewalks around the town hall, the community center, because those are destination points that people may walk to. So if this becomes a destination location to get to, then, we have an annual sidewalk program. I sit with the town board and we look at where do sidewalks make sense, so depending on what uses go here and what the draw is. Now are we going to draw from that surrounding community, then yes, we'd look at, sidewalks to and from, and, so people could walk here rather than having to drive a car, park in a parking lot, and then go walk on trails.
It would take a period of time to construct those sidewalks.
It's quite a bit of cost, and concrete sidewalks cost us basically $38 every foot you go. For a 5-foot wide sidewalk, you think of every foot is $38, so as you add it up, it's quite a bit of cost. So we look at, we try to leverage grants, we try to leverage, costs wherever we can, so we kind of put them strategically. But, it is an expensive thing, but obviously that's something this community is looking for. We're always talking about walkability, bikeability. Obviously people are trying to get out and be healthy, so it's a great thing to encourage.
And I live a quarter-mile away, and I get in my car and I drive there and get my dog out and walk, and then I get in my car and drive home because it's dangerous to walk.
Yeah, the Clark Road.
Clark Road's dangerous.
You're at Clark, yeah.
Yeah.
And the problem we've run into, it has not been an issue on Clark Road, but it has been an issue in a lot of areas where half the people want them and the other half don't.
Really?
Or we want them, but we want them on the other side of the street, we don't want them in our yard. There's a lot of that, believe me.
Yeah, I believe you.
So, but yes, first of all, you can make any recommendation that you want to the town board in this report. Accessibility to the site is a reasonable recommendation. It might take a period of time, and we could talk about short-term, long-term, or medium-term, long-term goals to get it all done. Short-term might be that we start doing it right away. Medium-term might be that we get 1 or 2 streets done in a reasonable time.
In this town, is the homeowner required to maintain the sidewalk?
They're not.
No.
No.
They give us an easement to allow us to install them, we are required. to.
No, and we take the liability of the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Unless you're out there
Yeah.
running a hose in the middle of winter trying to ice it and make something fall. Obviously that's on you, but we always say, in reasonable conditions, it's not like the city to city, you're required to clear your sidewalk from your property line to property line. We maintain the mainline roads, we don't plow subdivisions, so any subdivision street, it's up to the residents if they want to snow blow it or plow it within their neighborhood. But any of the main lines, 5 Mile Line or Penfield Road, Atlantic Avenue, we have a sidewalk plow. I'm sure you've seen them kind of bombing up and down with a little V-plow, clearing those off.
Just to touch base on the comment that Mark was saying about cost, because sidewalks are extremely expensive. The town board's been looking at the idea of sidewalk on Huntington Meadow from Panorama Trail to Clark Road. The cost of that sidewalk, I believe, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, was about $250,000 for that sidewalk. So,
For Huntington Meadow?
on Huntington Meadow.
As much as
And so that just kind of gives you an idea of cost of sidewalks. So,
And Clark Road, right under the meadow.
no, it's one side.
Which side?
Yeah. Well,
Well, we
that's
finally had two
yeah.
seventh grade ladies figure that out for
Yeah.
everybody, and they solved the problem, so kudos to them. All right, so we got to the point now, we agree for hiking trails, we agree biking trails, we agree on open space. And just as a reference point, when you're thinking of open space, think of Harris Wayland Park. There's a portion of where Harris Wayland Park that's all fields, athletic fields. It's got shelter. It's also got a wooded area behind it that falls down into the next subdivision, which has several walking trails on it. That would be perceived to be undeveloped land. If you were to walk it, you would think, all right, I can walk it, but there's nothing here but trees. So it's all perspective as to what you're thinking about when you're going through this. You go back to the list. Cross-country skiing, I think everybody's kind of in favor of cross-country skiing. That's no adverse impact to the environment whatsoever, I would think.
And I would like to speak to the gentleman that came, that does Durand and the other different county parks. I would love to hear him again. What's his name?
Brian Lilly and
Brian Williamson or something?
Brian Lilly and Ava Goebel.
Yeah, they do Hollister, Durand, Webster Park. They do all that grooming. I would love to talk to them again.
Okay.
Anna Gorbel, yeah. That's the Rochester Cross Country Ski
Yeah,
Foundation.
they stood up at the public meeting.
Do you remember that as well? Do you remember that as well?
No,
Oh.
no, I know all the people.
Kind of
from-
surprised, actually.
Anna was my coach when I was in high school.
Andy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we've been contacted by the school district about
Yep.
them looking to do some grooming for their school team.
So actually that they're going to start grooming, and they're going to be using it for practice runs for their team. They have been using it over at Bay Trail. For whatever reason, I mean, obviously with the open space, they're going to start grooming it for practice and all that stuff, I would think, starting this weekend with the amount of snow that we're going to get. So they do have a snowmobile that does all of those things. It's two separate trails that they would do. One's more like a sliding and open, and then one's like your standard, two ski lanes.
How do they determine where they should be and how long they should be?
So I know for now, since it's just for practice, I believe the thought was to kind of follow the cart paths to make it easier. I know that they've looked at, different options for, if they did ever want to do a meet or something like that, or at least to have those options.
Will they be setting up some type of markers so they can follow the paths, or how are they going to know?
I know that a Boy Scout was looking to do a project there about something like that. I'm not sure where that went to with those markers, but I'm sure that there's something out there showing
You
them.
can groom them, and then 2 feet of snow, 24 hours
Yeah.
later, they're gone.
And it would be, from what it sounds like, is as long as they get, and I don't know what the certain amount of snow is for them to groom, but based on their judgment, they kind of do it during the day, and hopefully it doesn't snow too much by the time they practice around like 3 o'clock. And they've been doing this at Bay Trail anyway, so obviously they've had success doing it there, so they kind of know what they're doing. But that should be happening. So. Yeah.
Want to jump down to athletic field?
Jim, are you going to take the action to invite them, or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So we want
So
to get
the
that
driving range people,
driving range people, the
cross-country.
Guineas cross-country, and then also
And nobody, I think, is too fond of the idea of the soapbox derby, but do we owe him a courtesy invite to hear his story? or
well,
not?
I don't know if you owe anybody anything, to be
No,
perfectly
okay.
honest. I think that
I'd rather
I think
not
what you're trying to
do it,
think
but-
about in your minds is, everybody in the world threw something at you that night to, just to stimulate your thought processes regarding what they want. What you have to think about is is that for the good of the entire 36,000 people? I mean, how many people are going to participate in an event?
When he was talking about bulldozers and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, but again, the point is, how many people are really going to participate in something like that?
And they've got a pretty nice site here at the front of the town hall.
So I think you have to kind of weigh that out yourselves. You have to decide, is it really truly a benefit to the community, or is it just something?
So it's just he
they
stood
like?
up at the public meeting and put such a pitch on that, you know.
But as I say, if you want to hear them, we certainly could bring them in. I don't know if it's worth your effort or
Yeah,
not.
I mean, one person came in, I hate to say that, but I mean, there's a whole bunch of things
Yeah.
with one person.
There are other
I
things.
agree.
I just wanted to raise it. I
mean, if you
agree.
look at
No, it's okay. I mean, that's why we're here. You gotta raise things so we
And
can
Bob,
discuss them.
Bob, he's looking at other sites in
Okay,
Monroe
he's got other
County.
places to go.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But
But I mean, if you're devoting a certain area of space, and it's quite a bit of space, to accommodate a very periodic thing that very few people might participate in, I mean, is it really to the benefit of the community to have it?
Again, we look at multi-purpose as a lot of what we're looking
Right,
at.
right.
and that
I mean,
doesn't seem-
we have 211 acres. A lot of it is not going to be developable. A lot of it you don't want developable. You've got to kind of be choosy as to what you're going to allow and not allow, or recommend and not recommend.
Curious, do we know how many acres Harris Hill Park consumes?
Not off the top of my
Yeah,
head,
Harris
I
Hill
know.
Park, just curious.
It's not anywhere near what this is.
'Cause that is a really nice prototype.
44, 45 acres.
And
the undeveloped area is probably, what, a third of it?
50. Almost got 5 times that.
Okay.
Rough numbers, if that's 40 acres, 5 times your 200.
Okay.
How much of that is natural and
So you're
undeveloped
4
up on the hill? That's about a third of it, I guess, huh? That spot there.
About half, maybe a little less than half.
Less than half, yeah.
But to me, that's undeveloped.
That's nice.
But there are trails all
And there are
throughout there.
trails in it, okay, that's undeveloped, yeah.
I would say it's undeveloped, there's nothing there except trails. Everything around is
That's, see,
developed.
that's, I think that's what you're thinking of, there's trails in there, yeah.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
undeveloped, yeah.
That is such a cool tool.
want
It's the second time tonight we've seen this thing.
It's your tax dollars at work.
I love it.
Well worth it right there.
acres. So virtually half.
About half of it is.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's nice.
thank you.
This is how we monitor all of you.
I believe that.
These photos are kind of old, actually.
This is 2050.
All right, so let's go back to the list. I think we're making some headway.
I think we're on athletic field.
The athletic fields. And certainly, when I think of athletic fields, I think of soccer fields, baseball fields, football fields, lacrosse fields, soccer. But I would also personally think of that as, like a driving range. I mean, you're taking up area, areas being devoted for a certain use, which you're probably not going to allow other things to happen within that area during driving range time, because, you're not going to be out there having your 8-year-old kick a soccer ball around while people are driving golf balls at you. So I would include that as part of it as well, as you're thinking about fields. So the question would be, is the committee interested in some kind of a field on that property, or fields somewhere on that property? And I'm not going to hold you to the driving range aspect of it yet, but we can think more of rectangular fields or baseball diamonds or something of that nature. Is there any interest in this committee's part to develop some kind of an athletic field on the site?
Well, to me, the benefit of athletic fields is they can be used in the wintertime for the cross-country skiing. To me, it passes a lot of what people want. I would say it's undeveloped. A rectangle of grass, to me, is undeveloped. Dogs can run on it if they want to. People can go running on it if they want to. It passes a lot of what people are looking for. It's not an eyesore. It's going to get used, which is a positive thing. It's going to be positive for the community with kids getting involved, that type of thing in athletic sports. So, I mean, personally, I don't see an issue with it, and I think it checks the box of a lot of the things people are looking for.
So, those are good comments. So, in addition to that, if you're going to use it for organized events, Hopefully it's used for unorganized events, but if it's used for organized events, you do need parking facilities to accommodate it.
Bathrooms.
Yeah, and
And the
grandstands,
bathroom. That's a good point.
and grandstands.
Well, I'm not so certain you need grandstands. I live right next to Greenwood Park, and that's been used for the little guy lacrosse for all the years that I can ever remember. My kids were in it. There are no grandstands, and I think that's what makes the park as nice as it is. You can bring a blanket out there. You can bring a blanket out and sit there, and you can have a picnic there if you want while the kids are playing. But you do need some support system to accommodate fields if you're going to have them.
But I think we heard that there's a shortage of the rectangular fields.
Yeah.
I think, so there seems.
I mean, if you ask anybody that plays a sport around anywhere, regardless of how many fields you have, I would say that they would think that they don't have enough fields just because of how much need there is. I mean, you look at youth sports and how much that's grown and school use and things like that. I think people are always going to say that. I definitely think that having more fields, that gives the town more ability to kind of disperse, and a lot of people don't think about resting fields that you currently do have. So that also helps with maintenance on your other fields, so you're not killing one field every year, having it at rest. But I'm not surprised people are saying that.
Well, I think it came out of the work that your group did that showed that we are at capacity with our rectangular fields, and there aren't any rest fields.
And I think that's more just because, when people ask to use fields, we want to accommodate. So people are always asking for more and more.
How many fields do we have in Penfield?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Soccer, softball, baseball, do we have a breakdown of?
We do. I mean, we have an inventory of where they are. He just doesn't have it tonight. But certainly we have them here.
I think this campus has most of the baseball.
We have them here. We have them in
softball fields here,
Greenwood.
and then
We have them at Rothfuss.
Rothfuss has got more of the rectangular fields
And we have them
and
at,
soccer, lacrosse
Harris Whalen.
over
Yes.
there.
I know that we have lots of parks in Penfield. Is there any space within those parks being reserved for other things that if we keep parks or fields off of this spot, we can add add fields to other parks? Like I know Rothfuss has that whole back area that we were thinking possibly a town hall someday. Is it an option to make those more rectangular fields to not only keep them in a more centralized area versus putting them on a property?
Didn't they say those were wetlands?
Well, there are some wetlands, but I think there are actually
There
some
is
plans to possibly develop a
plans to-
couple of fields out there.
Yeah.
There's plans to build 2 more rectangular fields in the back of Rothfuss Park right now. So that's
Question. When we think about fields, generally, I'm thinking the front 9, the north section, mostly, because it's flatter. That driving, where the old driving range is that suitable also? Or is that wet? It seems to be a little lower.
Well, I think the change
on
in
the
grade
south side.
probably gives it some wetness right after rain, but I mean, it drains well, it
I mean, if we go,
dries out well.
if we end up with a driving range there, are we cutting off the use of as an athletic field? Because athletic fields will get a lot more usage than a driving range, but a driving range will
Well, and
provide
that's
some
kind of what you
income.
have to think about as a group. What is the most benefit to the community based on what you recommend?
I think that's one of the criteria we need to live by, yeah.
I think that's one of the questions if we bring the driving range guy in is how many acres is he looking for?
Yeah.
The driving range is going to take up a lot of space. If he
Yeah.
wants
Yeah,
40
it
to
doesn't-
50
it
acres
doesn't get a lot of usage, yeah.
212, that's a lot of space for one use potentially that whether it goes wherever it goes, I mean, this group's not master planning what it ends up, but if they want 50 acres for a driving range and lessons, obviously that kind of just deducts from that top number.
The other thing you have to think about too is, as Jeff mentioned earlier, the things you think about is if you do need parking for a field, you might want to think about minimizing the amount of parking that's necessary because you don't want to pave over the area. So if you've got parking now just north of the Clark House, maybe you expand that parking out just a little bit more and put a field just north of that in close proximity to the road, because then you've got it away from the neighbors over on Harwood and those areas over there, and then you've got the parking already in place, so you don't have to go out and start paving over the
So, a couple of questions. What would be, I guess, the minimum number of fields that would be envisioned to put in to make it useful? I mean, is one?
It's a good question.
Need to be
You know,
five, or-
you could even make the statement that you're not opposed to a future field at some point in time if the need arises, but the township maybe exhausts its possibilities at Rothus or some other park prior to start
Yeah.
looking at this site as
I
a
think that's a
field
good
use.
idea.
I'm also
Yeah.
curious about what the cost of putting one in, installing one, and maintaining it is, and who pays for that?
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
we're paying for every field.
They're not free, right?
We're paying,
We are.
right.
Ultimately.
We're paying for every field that's out there right now, so it's well noted.
You generate some recreation fees, but
Right.
it doesn't cover.
To jump on the parking thing, if we're, the clerk house is going to be a business. And so we have to recognize that a lot of that parking is hopefully going to be generating money for the business, for the town. You put in a field, you're going to be needing parking. You put in a driving range, you're going to need parking. I mean, it's a decent sized parking lot, but if we start crowding it with multiple different visions of it, you're right, we're going to need to increase the parking. We're going to need to put parking, other places just to get people on there.
Well, and think about, and I don't want to divert too far off of where we are, but think about the barn. If somebody were to come in and refurbish the barn, which could happen, if they want to use it for maybe a wedding event or something like that, you need parking to accommodate them as well. So if everybody's in favor of like preserving a barn for historical purposes, and it's going to be used, you have to provide services for it to be used. So I think these are things you got to kind of think about as you're going through your thoughts on.
I'm amazed, a couple of people said they thought that was restorable, and after looking at it, I didn't see that, but there are people,
I've heard from
I
somebody
know a
this week
couple
who's
of
very
friends
willing to restore it.
who think they can pull it
Yeah.
off.
Really?
There's a lot of value in that old,
Yeah.
people like,
That
they're
rustic.
willing to do that because they want the history and they like that
The rustic feel.
really authentic rustic feel.
That barn's not as old as we thought it was, isn't it? Is it?
No, it's not as old, but I mean, it's obviously seen its best days.
It's got a block foundation.
But that does not mean somebody would not want to come in and for one reason or another refurbish it, and maybe not even use
got a
it. I
concrete
mean, just
block
for the sake of
foundation, if you look at it.
refurbishing it, as she mentioned.
It's not a cobblestone foundation, so it's not from
Not from
early 1900s. It has a normal block foundation under the building, so it's...
Really.
So what I'm really just trying to say is whatever you're thinking about in terms of uses, think about what the services are to support those uses as we're going through the process.
Jim, did the RFP go out yet?
The RFP is, I would say the RFP is basically done from the town's perspective. It's going to be reviewed now by a firm that deals with RFPs
Oh, okay.
to see if it needs to be embellished. But I think it's pretty close to being where it has to be. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, I think the supervisor would like to get that out to the town board for the 5th of February at their meeting that night. So
It's asking for definite proposals, right?
it's
Not-
asking
not
for,
just
no,
interest.
it's asking for proposals.
Proposals.
We're going to sift through and see which ones are reasonable and which ones would not be. So, and you'll be getting a copy of all that. It's going to be on our website before
Before long.
before much longer. So. Can we go back?
I don't know if we settled with athletic fields, or I don't make sure we're at group
Anybody-
I
consensus
mean,
before we
I
move
think
on.
what you said, Jim, about, we are open to the idea of a field pending the town's further research and exhausting other possibilities around the town before using that space as a field. To me, an athletic field doesn't really do it. I'm sitting here going, I don't know if that's really the best use for that space. And I think that we have a lot of other areas in the town that could be better used for that kind of purpose.
Is there,
Is it here earlier that we didn't have enough space for athletic fields? I mean, that's,
we don't.
Penfield Rec came back and said
We don't, but
need
there is
space.
area in Rothus right now they're looking at to develop more fields. Now, in 5 years or 10 years, as the population grows, we may not have enough again. We may need to look at this site. That's why, if you want to make a recommendation that says we're not opposed to it, but we really should look at the true need if we've run out of space in other locations that serve us. And then the other part of it is, are there areas on the site that you'd like to see the field more than areas that you wouldn't? Would you rather see it on the north side, on the front nine, or the area along Wayland Road there that's coming out towards 5 Mile Line? I mean, you could make those kind of recommendations as well if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I figured it would check a lot of the boxes that people are looking for. You know, I mean, you could make it, it'd be manicured, you know, at least cut, taken care of, you can walk, you can still walk and do everything you want to do. And you can still keep trees as separators and that type of thing. So you're really not changing the land all that much from what it is, which I think is what was very for people. But you do get a use for it from, you know, from the community. From a lot, you know, and everybody can use it because it's land. You know, you're not changing the basic foundation of what it is. You may have to smooth some areas out or something like that, but you can still keep the you know, a lot of the trees, you know, depending on how many fields you put in or whatnot, and you still have green, and you can still you can run on it, you can do anything on it, as opposed to changing it. To me, it just always made sense. But.
So, and if you look at, I mean, obviously, it's not what it is back in the day, but if you look at the golf course, there are a lot of manicured areas on the golf course. And I'm looking at down here at the, even further into the east. Yeah, in this area here. I mean, that might lend itself to having a reasonable athletic field at that site. And then you're close to the road, you could probably put some parking in there that you could buffer well from the rest of the neighbors. So there are things that you could look at in terms of...
Is there enough
providing
room to park in there by that maintenance building there?
I think you'd have to add parking,
Yeah,
at least there's a
you'd have
start
to-
there.
Yeah, if you had a
Yeah.
lacrosse game or a soccer game, where parents came, you'd have to provide
You'd have
service
to
for
add-
the park
And the
there.
nice thing about Whalen Road is there's almost no houses across the
Right,
street from
right.
it, so
That's a,
That's the point.
there's that one like old farmhouse there,
Yeah.
but that's about it.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I just pulled up the moratorium committee's report back in 2016, because a lot of what we're talking about was, you know, things that the committee members identified: lodges, pavilions, playgrounds, sports fields, trails, that includes foot and biking, and then open space, wild space, were their top recommendations.
Yeah, it seems to me like on the front, you could designate an area for fields. And, you know, you have all this land, because, you know, I keep hearing, you know, put a field in. One field really isn't going to make that much of a difference. You know, you can grab a field anywhere. But as far as, you know, designating an amount of land for that usage, that way you're carving it out and you
You could have multiple fields just in that area.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. You know, one field isn't going to do it, where if you could make, I hate to say like a complex, but more of a designated area for fields, I think they can go a long way, and it'd help us grow where the community's going to go. Because even one or two, I'm very close to this because I'm involved in a bunch of different things, but even one or two fields behind our office isn't going to do it. I mean,
Certainly not over a period of time, is the town.
even now, I mean, I know that there's a lot of conflicts on land and practice times and things of that nature. So, you know, one or two fields here or there isn't going to do it. You almost need a designated complex, from what I understand.
My boys play lacrosse too, and I gotta say though that the idea, that word is gonna scare people.
Yeah.
What's word?
Complex.
Well, I'm not saying complex.
No, but a complex does
just a
indicate,
piece.
you think
I don't want,
about,
I'm not talking buildings or anything, just a
but you'll need
designated
restroom
reserved area.
facilities, you
Mhm.
know, a larger amount of parking than what we're thinking about right now. You know, even if you think of six fields
Mhm.
with games going on all at once.
Right.
I think that's gonna
And I mean,
turn
anybody
some
who's
people off.
driven down Atlantic Avenue on Little League opening day at 10 o'clock in the morning is, I mean, they're gonna freak out when they hear that. That's what I envision happening.
yeah, are we talking baseball fields?
I think baseball has their
Rectangular.
fields.
Yeah.
They got-
Rectangular.
Taj Mahal of baseball.
Lacrosse,
There's soccer,
soccer.
right.
Baseball does, but
Multi-use.
softball does not.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball has 9,000 fields, softball has 2 fields
Two?
for like 10 teams of girls. And we have a porta potty. We don't have restrooms.
Right.
Are
Same thing with
are we
Greenwood.
happy or
Greenwood is-
we're not happy?
I'm a softball coach. I'm part of Penfield Little League. My girls play softball, and it's It's disheartening to see that we're like shoved off in the back
So-
two fields.
So you'd like to see a softball field or two?
I would like to see fields.
There
for
used to be
sure.
softball fields at that, on that park back.
The
in the
Lily
day.
Park.
Yeah.
Prior to the golf course.
So here's Greenwood, and Greenwood basically is utilized for little guy lacrosse. It doesn't lend itself to that need as much as it did prior to it becoming so popular. And on Saturday afternoons, you can see they bring teams in from all over the place, and they're parked all over Scrivener Road.
How many fields are in there, Jim?
Well, I'm looking right now.
Oh, I can see
So that's more, I mean, sorry.
It's more multi-use.
I'd look at that as more as open space that really is undeveloped that we line because of the need for that.
Yeah, I agree.
And that might be,
Yeah.
you know,
Once you get into
what you
say,
do
like-
to try and get the compromise you need for the fields.
And there's no bathrooms there either.
Nope.
No, there's no parking either. Well, a little bit of parking.
And parking is at a premium.
Park on the edge of the road.
There's definitely not enough parking there.
The parking on Scrivener Road is a little different than parking on Whalen.
Yeah, they just
Whalen Road's
expanded
a
it. This
busy
is
road.
new this year.
Right.
Doug, can you go to the front 9 along Wayland? Does that technology allow you to
Compare
show
space.
us like a 20-acre block and what that would look like on that property? 15-acre, 20-acre, 10-acre. I mean, the typical football field is 1 acre. I don't know what a typical soccer field is or a lacrosse field is. All right, so one usable youth field is equivalent to, let's say, 1 acre of land.
Plus parking.
Plus parking, right. So let's just say, I'm throwing it out there, you've got 5 fields, would take up 5 acres proper, and then you gotta add parking to that. A little more than 5 acres, because you gotta give some space for people to stay in.
Now you're
Yeah,
querying.
It's clear.
Andy, it's like 2 of the houses in that residential tract.
Yeah, that's true. It's two buildings.
Because I mean, you know,
Two building
from
lots.
town board perspective, at least I hear athletic fields quite a bit from the sports organizations that I communicate with. Not saying that I'm advocating yes or no, because it's not my responsibility or not my prerogative to tell this committee what they should or shouldn't do. But it is something that definitely is being talked about within the sports organizations. And so just to give a feel of what something would look like, I think a couple minutes Doug might be able to just kind of give us an idea of what 10 or 15 or 20 acres might look like on that property.
200 by 100, so that's more than that. That's larger than most fields. So block off.
Yeah.
I mean, go 20 times that. Keeps going up.
200 by 200, is that an acre?
Slightly less, but yeah. 200 by 200 is 40,000, an acre's 43,560.
Keep the cemetery.
Yeah,
Yeah, don't, I mean,
It's rough.
you're not going to
Just to give an idea,
have
there's about
There's
10
10
acres.
acres.
10 acres.
So that's not even, like, how far is that up Whalen Road? Can you zoom out a little bit?
That's,
We're just going
It's
north.
not.
oh.
So there's a lot.
There's a lot left up there.
Right.
What if we put it all the way up north?
Up in the corner.
Yeah, that's what I was
Put
kind
it
of
in
thinking.
that,
Up there.
Yeah, that's in the place.
That's why the bus garage is going.
Building a bus garage, Bob.
the Peterson School District bus garage, is that what, are you going to get the naming rights on that, Bob?
Yeah.
Let's clarify the Bob Peterson said that.
It would be like a riot
on the
if
other side
that
of the trees.
happens.
Yeah, because I think you don't want to be that parking lot.
Straight across.
Right, and then go down.
So that's a plan.
Yeah.
That's a plan. That's the very front of the front end, okay.
It's 15 acres.
All right, so that's 14 acres.
You know, and there's not a ton of trees there that I mean, you can keep the trees up top, but you want a buffer between the road and what's going on there.
Yeah, there's a good stand on the, right along Atlantic.
and you still have a lot of space there. So it's amazing when you
Yeah,
look at
and
it like
I
that.
guess what I'm getting at is, when we talked early on, I think we all acknowledged that there's going to be a level of compromise in coming to some conclusions.
53 acres.
And, I think it's of value to look and see what the acreage would actually compose of the entire front 9 or back 9, whatever. I think the front 9's more conducive to something like this.
Could we say something like space for 6 fields, six lacrosse type, soccer type fields?
Well, it would be nice if you could bring it closer to the roads and further away from the rest of the subdivision
Yeah.
to the west.
Yeah.
Well, it could be this way,
The other way.
rectangular this way rather than that.
Right.
So
And then add on to
this
the
square,
Buffer and utilize
this
that
square is
for
about the
trails.
same size as all of Wayland Park, including the wooded areas and the new pull-off that we did off the 250.
Just that box, he's got the
Just
thing
this
that's
box.
53
That's
acres.
53 About
Wow.
53 acres.
Yes.
How much do parking lots go for, cost-wise, approximately? Because I foresee, if we did that, then that opposite side of the buffer of trees, that would be all parking with a structure for bathrooms
Yep.
of some sort, so.
Obviously, you can make parking lots out of anything. The state requires you have to be paved within the right-of-way. So if you came off Atlantic Avenue, that's a state highway, you'd have to have a paved curb cut coming off the road, and then you could have a gravel lot inside of that.
ADA would be okay with gravel?
ADA was okay with gravel as long as you would provide paved pathways. You may have to have a paved pad for them to park on. The rest of the parking lot doesn't need to be, and then you can do stone dust for ADA compliance, as long as it's dry enough. It just has to be a finer aggregate, so it's a stone dust path. But then you could have a path from them into the fields or into, if there was a bathroom facility or something from there.
Okay.
I don't think it would be a good idea to have an entrance off Atlantic though, because
I was gonna say.
that's a terrible, terribly
That was
traveled
a
thing.
what if, but
Yeah,
just the
but like-
possibility,
But if you had it more towards the Wayland side, you could actually,
So Wayland's County, same
but
requirement.
we require the same thing as a paved entrance, just to
Right.
attract the gravel onto the street.
intersection,
the worse it
bigger the
is.
problem.
I would agree with you. I would not want to see any type of accessibility off of Atlantic Avenue.
No, it would have to be down Wayland as far as possible.
Yeah, and if you extended that parking lot that's already there north quite a bit, you could, have that as an adjacent area perhaps.
It's quite a hike to the fields.
Well, don't put the field so far up north, keep them
Well,
closer.
yeah, but once the field far north, it's in a place where not as desirable a hiking trail as further south. So it's a good place to get rid of them, disconnect from that in the northern part.
Well, I wouldn't displace hiking trail. I mean, there's plenty of trails up there,
Yeah, but
cart
it's
path
kind
up
of
there.
boring up there. It's a nice flat place, nice for a field.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
Maybe we
that's
don't have to worry
opinion,
where to
but-
site it, because that's going to require a consultant of some sort to do the planning
I
and
think
design.
what we need to do is
But
say.
maybe we scope out how much,
For
how many.
For example, we should say, we recommend that you use up to 10 acres, and this is just example, up to 10 acres on the north side of
Yeah.
the front 9 area,
Just
whatever we call it.
designate it
Yeah.
as something.
That's it.
Then it would be up to the town to decide with
Where it
experts
goes.
what to do and how to do it.
I feel like we should have a set of operating principles that we haven't, we keep talking around them, but like if we defined a set of principles, like, minimal impact to space, maximize trails, because that's what most people want.
Yeah.
If we have athletic fields, keep it to this, but I think having a set of principles will help us to designate whether these things are within the context of what people want or not. So maybe just writing them down and saying, does it meet most people, the most number of people in the town of Penfield? Is it for like 5 people, or is it for thousands of people? And maybe just kind of work it that way. Okay, everyone's.
No, you're onto something.
No, I think there are some principles here to look at. Number one would be to, try to follow through what the majority of the people want and what's good for the overall community versus the needs of a few. My other thinking would be that whatever you do, whether it's fields or whether it's not fields, you try to minimize impacts to adjacent residential property owners.
Yep.
And not create more of an impact than what they've had with the golf course or open space land. If there are fields, they should probably be closer to Whalen Road and any parking facilities immediately off of Whalen Road. And that would be true of any use that you come up with, whether it's fields or anything.
I think there's a set of holistic criteria: cost, traffic impact, the number of people wanting it, what the committee members want.
Are they realistic short-term or long-term goals?
And then each one of these could be measured or evaluated against the criteria.
Yeah, you could even weight the criteria.
And then we can rank them in the
Well,
order.
that's what we want to do eventually. I think once we get to a grouping of these that are reasonable
Got to cut them down a little.
probably break you down in groups and divide you up a little bit, and then let you kind of rank them out, and then bring you all back together and see how the rankings came out as each group looked at them. But I think what I'd like to do really is try to eliminate some of the ones that you really just don't want to deal with.
Most of the
Try and get it to a point.
Knock off the ones we definitely think are
Get it
not
to a
good.
point, get 5 or 10 major ones, and then some of the smaller ones, and make those your goals or your recommendations to the board.
There's a set of criteria in the charging document that Tony gave us, because he's expecting to see back.
Right.
He wants cost, he wants that.
Well, we can work out those details. I think initially I want to just get a comfort level from you as to what you think are reasonable uses
Yeah.
and what aren't. After that point in time, we'll start working out what the values are and even the time frames. I mean, some of them might be great uses, but you can't do them for 5 years for one reason or another,
I think we could go through and knock off a bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we could go through and say, this is a longer term goal, and this is a shorter.
That's what the report should actually show in the end.
Yeah.
You know, these are
We
what we
can go
think are
through this list
reasonable.
and I can see
These are
10.
timeframes that we think they're reasoned within. We understand there's going to be costs associated with it. We may need grants for this. We may not need grants. We may be able to pull this out of the recreation fund, whatever the case may be. We'll help you with that when the time comes. It's just a matter of getting to a point that you're comfortable with what the uses should be.
I think an important criteria, at least for me, is reversibility. If you do something, can you go and change it? Like if you put a ball field in, no big deal. You can put a skate park there. But if you put a building there, you're done. Something like that.
Right.
Trying to say like minimal impact to.
So why don't we look at that? We've talked about a few of them
You
already.
want to start at the bottom and work up? With the
Well,
least popular,
actually,
you
that's
want
not
to
a
start
bad idea, because there's less down there that we can, we're fine.
We'll agree
We've
more.
already gone through, I think we're at the top, we might as well stay at the top. We've already knocked off
Okay.
either the first 6 of those or whatever, it is 7 of those.
I'd support what Susan said earlier, supporting you, Jim, and that look at other places being exhausted before we start putting athletic
All
fields.
right, we'll incorporate that into that recommendation, if everybody's agreeing to it. But again, think about 5 years from now. As you say, if we don't have enough right now, we may not have enough 5 years from now as well.
Could be another committee.
All right, so we did talk about athletic fields, Penfield Recreation and Community Center.
I think we can knock that one off.
Yeah.
What's everybody think?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Everybody there? All right.
You're saying yeah to
Sorry.
not
Playground?
taking off. Okay.
But to clarify,
Great.
I heard
Oh wait,
yes
I
and no's
thought
and
we're saying yes to knock it off the
Knock
list.
it off the
Correct,
list.
correct,
Yes.
Is everybody there for that?
yeah.
No,
Is anybody not there for that?
I'm not there for
You're
that.
not there for that, okay.
I'm kind of iffy.
Well, didn't we already say that Rothfuss Park area had that already slated as a possible site?
Well, it did, but there are other sites in town too that could be located as well, so.
And there was,
Are you interested in having one at that location?
Perhaps.
Well,
Yes.
Were you the one that told me a little while ago you didn't want to see anything but open space
No, I think the area near the
for the north? Or
east,
in that one little stretch area? as you-
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody's favorite pole.
yes,
Yeah,
everybody's
everybody's sort of
favorite
like that
spot,
for
right
everything.
there.
Well, so
So you think that might be a good location for a
Yep.
community center? And you said you're iffy, what do you think?
I think that our existing facilities are too small and they don't quite measure up to some of our neighboring towns' facilities.
Yeah.
And so I was just thinking, we didn't have enough room at Rothfuss when we looked at it a month ago or so, that this offered enough room, definitely, that it could be a possibility for a portion of this property.
Yep. All right.
Because I do think it would add a lot of value to our town as a place to live, and certainly it would get tons of use if it was.
What are you
designed properly.
envisioning in the community center? What are you talking about as opposed to what we have now?
Should we stick to the list versus trying to get? into
Yeah,
the
I think that.
You mean something like Henrietta has a
Oh, I don't know what
swimming
Henrietta
pool,
has,
or
but-
Parrington
Like Parrington
indoor
has that
pool?
really nice one. Pittsford has a new one.
That's what you're thinking about, a major deal.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. Where were the courts before they went into Baird
They were
Road
here.
School? They were here? You
They
had
were
them here?
upstairs, yeah. The
Upstairs?
state troopers were here,
Yeah.
the courts were here.
Okay.
It was a disaster because every Monday, they'd have it on Monday nights, and then I come in on Tuesday mornings and drywall would be kicked in because somebody got mad at their
Really?
their lawyer.
Okay, so they went from here to over there?
Yeah, it was a good
Okay.
thing. And you know, Chris made his presentation to you the last time he was here about the idea that it's not a good idea to have the courts in the
No,
same
it is
area as
not.
recreation. That's not a good mix for anybody.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think he's supportive of getting the courts away from
Yeah.
recreation and vice versa.
Is saying like the Penfield Recreation, isn't that a bigger scope than this group? It seems like that's a town decision of, hey, do we need a new rec center?
It is.
Do we need this? I mean, this seems like, it's almost the question of, do we want to build a building on the
Right.
property as opposed to the rec center? Because, I mean, we're, a group here, there's got to be a bigger picture of what are we doing with the rec center?
And the comprehensive plan is looking at some of that. That committee is looking at some of those overall. We've had recreation come in and talk about their needs and wants. I think this group just looked, would you even want to consider the possibility of a facility being on this property, in that scope? Where it goes, how big it is, obviously that, that'll fall to somebody else, but
Right. I mean, it
this
seems-
group just to say, do we consider that to be a compatible use with what we see the vision of this park being?
It seems like it
Or
goes
this area?
against the things that we don't want to do. It's going to be more parking, buildings, all that type of thing. Yeah, we're
Open
taking away the
space
open
spaces.
space.
Yeah.
Seems like it's going against everything
It
that we've already gone over and
It
that we're
does.
trying to avoid.
It does, but I think if you put it in a corner of the property, like that, everybody's favorite area, I just think that it has big synergies with paths. You could picture families coming, going on the paths and using the open space, maybe using the rec facility. And I think that if you contained it to the corner, it would not, to the corner where really there's nothing, there's some houses on the one side, but you could buffer that. But there's no houses, it doesn't have much impact to anyone from the standpoint of their own view out their backyard. I just think that it has synergies and it would be a huge benefit to the community. And I don't think we're up to par with our east side neighbors.
I have an idea about that corner of my own, that in 35 or 50 years, whenever, there's going to be a lake over there, a very nice lake, and I see that as a place for picnic areas and perhaps a bathhouse or something like that, if you're going to go over and go kayaking or canoeing or fishing across the road. And the other thing is that's a well-traveled, busy corner at times, and having a whole lot of parking there is probably not a good idea. Just my thoughts. And I don't know enough plans about the future use of the quarry. This facility that I'm thinking of may have room to put it across the road, be in the quarry itself. I don't know if there's enough flat land there.
Well, what you're
they
talking
keep
about would be
blasting.
better on the other side of the road.
Right.
So
It
people-
would certainly be better, but they're still blasting on the south wall there. They're going to extend, there's not going to be much level land left when they're done. And I envisioned having picnic tables and, you know, maybe lodges or something like that on this side where families could come and picnic and then go over there and fish or canoe. But that's way in the future. But I guess I surely wouldn't like a community center sitting there
Yeah.
in that particular spot.
Yeah.
Steve?
I was basically what Jeff is saying and what Bob is saying, I want to second that. Community center is very, very nice. Harrington has a beautiful one, Henrietta has a beautiful one, I guess Pittsburgh does, I don't know. But it really is not necessary to deal with it in the context of this land that we're talking about. It can be it can be many, many other places. And it's a gigantic expense, enormous, what, $500,000? No, more, many millions.
Many millions.
Many million dollars. It changes the entire character of everything that we're doing here. So, you know, if we want to make a recommendation to the town, think about a recreation center at some point, let's do it. But let's not do it in the context of this wonderful piece of land that we have here.
Well, if there's better places to
Yeah,
put it,
yeah.
I'm all for that.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that the town needs something. and-
Well, maybe well, but it's a tail wagging the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the consensus is not to do it, if it's okay?
Fine with me.
We don't all have to be unanimous, and I don't
We
think we're all
can
unanimous
vote,
on it.
I could
but we should
support
vote
that.
we should
You
vote
know,
on
I gotta
that.
tell you, I'm really impressed with the interaction tonight. First of all, it's very polite, it's very calm. Everybody's understanding what everybody says. There's no back talking to everybody and side comments. I think it's great that you're able to throw this stuff out there and everybody's listening to it. And without that, I mean, we're not gonna have any ideas if you don't do what you're doing. So I commend you tonight. I think it's probably the best meeting we've had. All right, playgrounds.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you think playgrounds are reasonable?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Spray parks?
I mean, I would be an advocate for that. And it's kind of one of those things that I was saying long ago before the vote even went through that, you know, I think Penfield could really use something like that. I mean, the closest one that we have is the Webster Fireman Spray Park or the one in Durand, and I'm not even sure or not Durand, Camp Eastman, I think it is. But I feel like it would be a great benefit for the families with younger children to have a place to go to. And a spray park, you know, takes up a very, it can be small, it can be big. It doesn't have to be this gigantic water park with water slides. I mean, we're just talking about areas that little kids can go and play and cool off in the summer. And you can bring your pets and you can let them play around in the surrounding fields. You know, if you've got athletic fields there, you could have a spray park right next to it so the little kids can go do something while they don't want to watch their brothers and sisters or whatever play sports. So I think a spray park, in my opinion, I would advocate for that. Again, you know, if the consensus is no, the consensus is no, but I would say that we have to think that it's not going to take up a tremendous amount of room, and I think it's something that's needed in this part of town.
Susan, you envisioning a bunch of plumbing in there for the water park?
Well, I mean, that's going to be a given, I think, with a spray park, and I don't know in terms of the current irrigation system that's there, if there's something that we can just kind of hook up to and sort of rerun. That would have to be something that, you know, an engineer or somebody would have to come in and take a look at, but I would understand that we do have an irrigation system of some sort.
Well, you can't really use the irrigation system per se because you're dealing with children or human beings. So the Water Authority and the Health Department has specific guidelines. It's not that it's not doable because you certainly have water access throughout the entire property off of the main highways there. But it's a situation where it would have to be a specialized thing where the water's treated, the water's chlorized.
And we have sewer also.
And you have sanitary sewer as well.
Putting it there isn't going to be wouldn't be the big issue, because there's water and sewer.
Yeah, and you're right, it doesn't take up a lot of space, and it might be, you know, part of the playground area, who knows? But the question would be, maybe we do need a spray park in the town, I don't know. My kids are grown up now, so those days are gone for me.
Our
But
grandchildren come.
But maybe it goes somewhere else where there's other playgrounds or something of that nature, I don't know. So I mean, it's up to you as a group, you can make that decision, but again, it's a recommendation. It's just a recommendation, and if you think it's an appropriate location for it.
I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
not
thinking
a
of-
strong advocate, but I'd certainly be happy to see that there. I mean, my kids, we go to the one in Webster and we go to the one up at Camp Eastman, and
Is there a way to make it not look so plasticky? Like the one in Webster is, you know.
It's great.
Oh, it's fun. I mean,
But it's not,
I want to
It
go play in the
doesn't-
Webster
it's
Spray
not in
Park.
the character
Of
of
the
keeping
property.
it looking
Right.
natural.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
you make it
Yeah.
look like trees.
Are you
I
spending
don't
time at the
know.
spring
I mean, I
park?
think anybody can come in and kind of
I thought you were
architect and
just hanging
design
out.
that,
They
you
beg
know,
me
in a
every
way
time we're here in the
that's
summer.
aesthetically pleasing, I think
And
that's
fits
a
with
design,
them.
that's a design issue, that's not, I don't think that's up to us to
Yeah.
necessarily decide, but if somebody wants something that sort of blends in with the look and feel of the property, I think you
Yeah.
can find an architect or engineer to come in
we could do that because the only one I've seen is the Webster one, and
Yeah.
it's all, you know,
Right,
plasticky and
yeah.
So I have,
fun, but.
I have a process question. Are we trying to eliminate certain of these?
Well, we're going through
Or,
to
so
see which
this
you
one,
support,
this
which
one
ones you don't wanna put
is
in.
debatable, so it should stay on and
Yeah, you could make it
for
playground
evaluation
slash
later
water,
on, right?
you know,
Yeah.
splash.
Or it could double as
Yeah, I
an
don't need to believe that.
So this is just a rough cut, right?
No.
We're gonna put these together for you, and we'll go through them and fine tune them.
This is a first cut.
So Andy made a good point. If you put the wording in there, playground slash spray park or whatever it is as part of the overall, you can wrestle with that later on as you come to your final design for the report. We
Swimming
talked
pool.
about, swimming facility. What's your thoughts on putting swimming pools in? Again, swimming pools need parking. They need,
Cost, a lot of maintenance,
Monitoring.
staff.
they need
staff.
changing rooms, they need staff, good point.
Lifeguards, yeah.
Lifeguards, which are not the easiest people to find these days. I don't know if you've been seeing this, but
Yeah, and
for
an
the last couple
outdoor
of years,
swim
it's been tough.
facility.
Right. That's good for about a month.
It's good, right.
And I guess I'd like to know, as it relates to, the school district shares their pool with the recreation department for swim lessons and everything else. I wonder, what the value of it is in terms of how many people would really go if we had our own pool.
What if we left that
Well,
as part of the, the recommendation for the rec center? The
Yeah.
Community center?
include- Yeah, if.
So you could make a recommendation that a pool, if there's ever going to be developed at the location of a community center,
Right.
it should be at that
I
site,
think it should be there.
not in a standalone process on its own.
Yep.
Handicapped accessible trails, we talked about that, everybody support it.
Yep.
Off-leash dog park.
Where was ice rink?
Skip
Oh, did I?
Ice rink.
Ice rink.
Oh, what do you think about,
That's the
I think that'd be
when you
awesome.
think about ice rink, I think about two different types of ice rinks. I think about the one that we saw at Dwyer Park that has the hockey arena, where you could go in and play hockey, or just an
Flooding
open,
parking
or just
lot.
flooding a parking lot and just letting people go out and skate.
Yes.
We have not had a lot of good luck with skating rinks in
They
Penfield.
do that down in Ellison.
Yeah, Ellison Park.
Ellison,
Ellison
yeah.
Park, yeah.
is that pond on the north side, the small pond, is that something that could be used for skating?
It's kind of small. I looked at that myself thinking that might be a good facility after we had our informational meeting.
It's seldom,
It's
it's seldom
small.
frozen.
Yeah, it is.
It's seldom.
As a Huntington Meadow resident for over 35 years, I've ice skated on that pond many a time. I had Gardy Odenbach chase me off that pond multiple times because he lives in that house right there on the last hole.
But that was 20 or 30 years ago.
That was a while ago. And on the other
We're not
pond,
making
up
ice,
above,
we're
too.
not,
But I'm
very seldom is
thinking,
that
you
frozen
going
over.
yourself and a couple of your buddies going is one thing, but I mean, to open it up to the public to have skating, I don't think it's big enough to
It's
really
not big
accommodate it. It's not easily accessible either. There's berms on one side, there's rock on the other side.
I think it's a safety issue too.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna do it, you want it in a flat area that you've got good accessibility. I mean, if you got little kids you're trying to teach skating to, you're getting them out of the car, you're trying to get their skates on, you're trying to do all this and that.
Yeah.
It has to be an accessible and easily accessible type operation.
I love the idea of having a skating rink because if we have these, cross-country trails and people can snowshoe, a skating rink would add to that winter recreation destination feeling. And if we could also sled on the driving range, that could be another thing that we could have tobogganing. we could make it kind of like in the winter, a little,
A winter park.
a winter
A little
park.
resort area
Yeah.
for winter sports, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that could be really an attraction for our community and outside our community.
Is the parking lot flat, or is that kind of a slope? Like in the winter time?
It's actually fairly flat, but even if we're a little bit sloped, you could still design it so that you could hold water in there. It's really just a matter of laying out, material and then boxing it out so that it holds the water and drains it out. But it has to be large enough to accommodate a good group of people coming in. You don't want it just for one or two.
I will say out loud that I don't like the idea of a walled rink. I don't like a hockey rink.
No,
Yeah,
I agree.
Okay, so if people supported it, it's more like a
Yeah.
flooded parking area.
Like Ellison.
Like Ellison.
Yeah.
Do we need
Right.
another one? Does the
And
one
in
in
the
Ellison
future,
get
the-
used a lot?
Yeah, when it's frozen.
Yeah.
I was down there Saturday, they were playing a bunch of kids.
Yeah, they're playing hockey,
Yeah.
so I was there too.
The other part of that too is when you have it in the summertime, you can use it for box lacrosse, but we're building a box lacrosse facility now.
Well, you need, that's where you need the walls though. again,
Right,
so that's-
but we are doing that. We are actually building a walled box lacrosse facility. So you really wouldn't justify having a walled ice skating rink because you're not going to use it during the summertime.
Where's that going, John?
So-
Rough.
It's going in a roughest, but I believe that the one there is only gonna be for turf that will not have
Correct.
skating.
Right.
That
It's strictly for lacrosse, soccer, that kind of thing. So is everybody comfortable with saying that you'd like to have a non-walled,
Right.
Sure.
That's almost like something you just do temporary.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think
exactly.
that's,
Yeah.
That's
We
very
try to do
common,
it.
you don't
yeah.
even need to designate that,
I
that's.
think that,
you have
that could be
the-
up to the town to just say, we're
If they're building
sitting here for the
a
winter.
parking area, it's good to tell them that they're thinking of that, because then they could design the parking lot to be able to be
Sure.
an ice rink. If you can't just take any flat land,
Right.
you'll have to slope it a little bit to keep the water, or design it to keep water.
Yeah, we've not had great luck over the years. We've had them at Harris Whalen, I believe. Kenny, do you remember?
Yep. Harris
And
Whalen, they
it
used to
started out
put in
great,
there.
and then a couple weeks, you get some
Yeah.
wet, or
It
some
didn't get
warm
enough
weather, and you don't
use,
get
so
the
they
catch that you
stopped.
need for it.
Yeah.
So, you're not spending a lot of money doing it this way
Right.
either, which is
Right.
nice. And that could be an immediate layout if you wanted to do it. All right. Off-leash dog park. What do you guys think about a dog park?
Sure, why not?
I don't think off-leash is.
Not off-leash.
Not off leash.
Well,
They
that's
already have them at Ellison.
Ellison's Park
fenced
would be
in.
a fenced
It's
in.
fenced in.
Fenced in.
Yeah, it's fenced-in area.
Yeah, it's just, it'd be a
Yeah.
dog park.
Seems
Yeah.
like
It's a dog park.
down the road.
But you gotta have little dogs with little dogs, big dogs with big dogs.
Right.
As a trail runner, I am in big favor of giving people a place to have their
Dogs.
dogs off leash. So
And let them
they
go in?
don't have
So they're
them
not-
off leash on the trails. It's incredible how many people cannot follow those rules
Yes.
on trails.
And don't pick up after themselves?
Yeah.
Not just that, like dogs that people clearly cannot control that are off
Yeah.
leash.
Good point.
But another point, there's a very fine dog park in Ellison Park already, and it's way close.
Right.
And there's also one in Perrington off Whitney Road, for people like me who live in the southern part of town. We can use it, it's not our town, but we can use it. It's not necessary to have a dog park right now.
Well, I can tell you that the one in Ellison is a little scary in a couple ways. First of all, in the summer, the area in the back has the pond.
Yeah.
And I am really nervous about my dog in that area because he drinks the water, and I know that lots of dogs have gotten Giardia from that water. And then the front, and there's also dogs in that park that are not, maybe they're not supposed to be there, or like there's been attacks in that park from some dogs that I don't think came from the area. And
Well, you're not gonna stop that at another one.
In the city, no, it could happen.
well, further out, maybe you, I don't know. I don't know. It would be. I don't think that park is just the answer to everything.
The park's in the floodplain too. I don't know.
And it's in a
That would be the
floodplain.
one
I
thing I
don't know
would.
how often you
Chris, have you ever
not
tried the,
because of the flooding. And there are a lot of dog owners in Penfield, there's no question about it. We can generate those numbers easily, but
I mean, if it's not too much money, maybe have one that's not like that's somewhere on the property.
Do you pay a fee to go to that dog park?
Yeah, it's like $25 a year. I mean, it's really cheap.
Because I am thinking of that, I mean, if we have to put fencing up and that kind of thing, and it probably has to be decorative fencing, not just.
And yeah, doesn't that go against, again, what, we didn't want to put boards up for hockey, we want to put
Right.
fence up for dogs.
Yeah, chain link fence doesn't look so.
No.
It's not a big thing.
Well, I didn't know we didn't want to put boards up for hockey because of the way they looked. I mean, if we're willing to put a spray park in and a playground. I mean,
Well, again, and you can, I mean, I'm not gonna tell you whether you should do it or not, but you can buffer anything, depending on what it is, you can buffer it.
And we don't have to rule it completely in or completely out tonight. If there's interest, we'll leave it on the list.
Leave it a question mark.
yeah, and then we can evaluate
We could
it.
say it later. We don't have,
Yeah, you can handle it any way you want.
exactly.
So what's your thought on that matter?
Question mark?
Leave it on the list for now.
It's on the list.
Wrestle with it later on? All right, with it later. All right.
Kick it down.
Solar field.
No?
No,
I think we're pretty much.
I'm not opposed to solar field. I just don't think this is the
not there.
Well, when that was said, they probably didn't realize we have a solar field over at the Jackson Road facility,
Right.
so we're not gonna be putting a second one up, I don't think of any.
Okay, I think we talked about solar fields enough.
I know. So I think that's probably a good recommendation on this part.
That'd be a no.
golf course probably isn't going to happen.
Nine-hole, executive nine-hole golf course in conjunction with Lawn Croquet Club on former Front 9. Now you're basically just turning the thing back into
Back into a
something
golf
that a
course.
small group of people would be interested in, and the rest of you
No.
wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't think a golf course is going to
We,
happen.
we,
No
we
question.
tried a golf course 2.5, 3 years ago when it first went up for sale. I think, Jim, you and I reached out to, what, 15 different national golf course ownership companies, and we didn't get any responses. And talking to some of these people, as soon as you said Rochester, New York, they're like, not interested. Because the season's not long enough for the financial commitment.
Their comment was, we're not gonna own it. If you own it, we may manage it for you,
May.
but it wasn't anything that was
Yeah.
on the top of their list.
Yeah.
And we
So-
not only did it in the United States, we also went to Canada too, to see if they would do it in
Yeah.
Canada.
So, I mean, I think we really, we gave it a good effort with these national companies. Talked to a guy that I know that works for a subcontractor of the PGA. He connected us with people, and there just was no interest in owning and operating a golf course.
They're all very polite to us.
Yeah, they were.
That's about it.
So,
Pavilions and picnic tables.
I think no matter what, we're going to have those. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
You guys talking about
Talk about pavilions, I view it as rustic with a grill, but not an enclosed with a kitchen and a sink and
Yeah.
Not like that.
microwave and all of that.
Allison,
Like it,
No, just a rustic,
Yeah,
a
just
picnic,
open air.
just an open
a
type.
shelter.
Yeah, Phil,
Yeah,
Does
okay.
everybody feel that way?
Yeah.
Is there a need for more closed facilities?
Yes.
We have two, correct?
Absolutely.
I think there is a
I
need.
think, Chris, the other night, Chris made a statement that they basically ended up every weekend was gone within 90 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we
For the
have,
summer.
we have two and they book up really quickly. I mean, it is a revenue generator. There are some
It's Dolomite Lodge
maintenance
and
and Dolomite and one at Harris Whale.
Harris Whale.
Those are
They
the two
do
close.
book up quick.
Yeah, Harris Whalen, you can't get into. I've been trying to book it for 3 years for my daughter's birthday party. Haven't gotten to do it yet.
So I think we need an enclosed one
Yeah.
or two. You could make it look really good. I mean, I know there's one up in Webster I went by and I couldn't believe it was
Oh, it's a brand new one they put over at the park.
yeah, and it was.
That's not what, that's actually the county.
That's the
Is that
county.
the county?
That is
They
the county
charge
park,
$1,000 a day for that facility.
Yeah.
Well, it overlooks the lake, right? Yeah.
We have one in our town too. We have one on Orange Bay.
Okay.
Which they charge $1,000 a day.
$1,000 is pretty cheap if you're looking at
Right.
Oh, why didn't
100 people there for a wedding.
But you could, I mean, we could make something look good and not.
The Harris Whalen Lodge is a beautiful lodge. I think that's a
We
great
just rent
lodge.
out the clerk house.
True.
That's really nice.
It's a nice lodge, yeah. So
And
if
it's
we can
rustic
mimic
looking,
that,
it would
yeah.
fit in with the.
Yeah, I think
As long as we had it fit in with the
But-
environment.
So you made a comment about having an outdoor type pavilion, open air pavilion. What's thought by everybody?
I think it would get.
Versus
Yeah,
a
along with picnic areas too.
So let's say we could build
Scattered.
enclosed pavilions in other locations such as Philbrook Park by the,
And like,
you got, if you're gonna build an enclosed pavilion, you really have to have the ability to be close to a road and have adequate parking to it. You're gonna have to have parking for this
Right.
one too if you build it. And I'm not quite sure where you build it, but
That's a great.
Yeah, I mean, even the open ones, you're gonna have parking.
you need parking.
Yeah.
Close by.
Close, but yeah, you're carrying coolers and everything else, food and all that, so you gotta do it.
I'd personally be in favor of both. I mean, one of the things we've talked about a lot tonight is aesthetics, and for me, seeing people out and using space is one of the most pleasing things when it comes to a park and stuff like that. So even if they're not doing any kind of prescribed recreation, they're just renting a pavilion, and there's a large family or a gathering or something like that, and people are just running around and grilling, and that's great.
Well, you did talk about a winter resort type setting for that property. In the winter time, you're not gonna get a lot of people using outdoor open
Right.
pavilions.
Yeah,
so.
you need
And that could be, if you made it really nice and had a nice view of maybe like the pond or something, it could be a revenue generator, like the one up in Webster.
Oh, anyone we build will be a revenue generator.
Yeah, I mean, if you charge $1,000 a day, you're gonna get,
Well, we're not gonna charge $1,000. That's the county of Monroe doing that.
okay, so, but if you charge a good amount,
The other ones are a couple.
you're going
$100 a day.
to make money and you'll get like people aren't gonna trash it as well, so.
Right. Well, he's looking at me cross-eyed.
Yeah.
It's amazing what some people
We do a
will
lot of maintenance to those on a daily basis, so glad that they're still looking at it.
Ah,
Theoretically.
Mr. Peterson's warning me that it's beyond 9 o'clock, and I don't want to,
Oh.
I mean, if you're all interested in keep going, we can do this, but if you want to get it going, I understand that.
Well, I mean, I think you at least wrap the conversation on the, whether a Dolomite Lodge or something else. I mean, at least if you're on that topic, if you can.
I'd say we could do it in a phase 1 and the phase 2, phase 1 maybe is the open more rustic facility, and then with a plan to build in the future, make it on the list of recommendations.
Yeah, and certainly you want to do it in a buffered area. You don't want it just on the street. First of all, you don't want to look at it if you don't have to. And secondly, you want to put it in a location that draws people to want to be at that location and not just, just there for the sake of being there.
Hole 12. Hole 12.
That's getting busy fast.
Everything's
Yeah,
gonna
we
be.
have a pond there, there's
We have
some
all this big
photography.
space, and
I think we should put it
holes
right
getting
across
all
from Bob's
allowed.
house.
What's going
there's
on?
some lodges at Mendon Ponds that I've used in the wintertime that were, I guess they were enclosed, but they were rustic. They had a fireplace and a space for tables and I guess a sink, for cleaning the pots, but
And bathrooms.
it wasn't fancy. You wouldn't go in there and cook a meal. You'd bring your food in and roast it on the grill outside and eat it inside by
Well,
the
and depending,
fireplace.
yeah, good point. And depending on
And you do your
the
cross-country
value of the
skiing or
barn,
sledding
who
or
knows what
whatever
that's going to be.
else outside.
Maybe they determine the barn can't be saved. If the barn can't be saved, maybe you take some of the wood out of the barn and incorporate it into a new facility right there.
But I was thinking of that as opposed to a Dolomite Lodge,
Yeah.
at least to start.
All right, so we want to make a comment that,
That's a really good idea.
Definitely pavilions and picnic tables, and possibly in the future, a lot.
Yeah, there you go.
all right, is everybody comfortable with that?
Yep.
You okay?
It's already there anyway, so we're incorporating
It
it
is,
too.
right, yep.
And there's a golf course on there we can take off immediately too.
It's the 18-hole golf course.
18-hole golf
Yeah,
course.
right. Yeah, the 18-hole golf course is off.
We don't like the
I'd
nine.
say-
Getting back to,
We're at the state right
So
now.
skate.
well, you want to stop there tonight? I mean, we could go on forever.
Sure.
I want to get you home. That was a great meeting.
Everybody take a look at what's left.
Take a look at what's
Next
left.
meeting ready to
Come
fall.
prepared.
Well, we can
Stay as
summarize that
animated as
last
you
one
want,
we've got
right?
on our notes
Great.
and push that back out.
Jim, last time you asked